Thank you for listening to the show on Really Big Something Channel. November 22nd, 2017.
The Kuhner Report, presented by Kelly Financial Services.
Well, folks, welcome in. Here we are the day before Turkey Day. By the way, I saw a piece on the news. If you're going to fry your turkey, I'm not sure I'd want a fried turkey. I love it when it's roasted. But if you're going to fry a turkey, they say you should state right there at the cooking location, because fires can start and then all bets are off. So be very careful if you're going to fry your turkey, especially if it's indoors. There are so many things we want to cover here today. That 2 tweets by Donald Trump, or actually 3, 2 about LeVar Ball, 1 about the NFL. We'll get to that. And other things that have come up. It's a range of issues, but the one that probably is most compelling is the one having to do with this incendiary former physician, Larry Nassar, 54 years old. You just heard the report on the news, out of Michigan. He worked for USA Gymnastics in a position of trust, handling medical issues for young people, girls in their early teens, as a matter of fact. He also worked for Michigan State, pleaded guilty today, just pleaded guilty this morning, to multiple charges of sexual assault. He gets at least 25 years behind bars. He actually admitted to abusing 7 girls, but who knows how many more might have been his victims. It was under the guise of treatment at his home in the Lansing, Michigan area, and also at a campus clinic. All but one of the accusers was a gymnast, somebody he was to take care of, somebody he was to protect, somebody with whom he was given trust. There's another county in Michigan where there are lawsuits filed by more than 125 women and girls against former Dr. Nassar. He lost his license to practice in April. Now, among the gymnasts, Allie Raceman from right here in the Commonwealth, Michaela Maroney, and Gabby Douglas, they publicly said they were his victims. Some of these victims attended the hearing today and were not real pleased. His comment was this. Nassar said, "For all those involved, I'm so horribly sorry that this was like a match that turned into a forest fire out of control. I pray the rosary every day for forgiveness. I want them to heal. I want the community to heal." Well, it's a little too late, Mr. Nassar. He did admit to digitally penetrating the victims. He agreed that his conduct had no legitimate medical purpose, and he did not have the girls' consent. But even if he did, if it were not for a medical purpose, it would be statutory rape anyway, since these girls were underage. Now here's the kicker. Because he pled guilty, he avoids a life sentence. Why? Who knows? But he gets a minimum prison sentence of 25 years. The judge could go to 40 years. And you're eligible for parole after serving a minimum sentence of either 25 to 40 years. Here's the point. This guy is the lowest of the low. This guy has done things that are grotesque. We keep using words like that in the last several days, thanks to the sexual dysfunction of a lot of people in the Congress, in Hollywood, entertainment, in sports, wherever. in the media. And I'm not sure there's anything worse than what this guy did to these girls. I don't think there should be any quarter for this guy. He should be behind bars for life, period. It's a sickness. When somebody does the things that he did, there's nothing to redeem about that. That is a pure disgrace, and it is unforgivable. How can you forgive a guy? And I want you to think about this as parents, folks. How could you forgive a guy who did these acts if it were your daughter, age 12, 13, 14, 15? And many of you have children. Many of you have daughters, whether they're adult now or whatever age they may be. They were teenagers. And here is a medical doctor. At the time, he was a medical doctor. He's been stripped of that. Who took that position of authority and trust, where he's supposed to take care of the medical needs and medical protection of these girls, and instead of doing that, he penetrates them digitally for no reason other than personal gratification. No reason whatsoever. No medical reason. And he's admitted that. Should he be given a sentence that's less than life? Should he get a 25-year sentence? Or even a 40-year sentence? Our number to Boston is 617-266-6868. And remember, 125 women and girls have all filed complaints with Michigan State University police. So these 7 aren't the only ones. This guy is a rampant, toxic disease. He shouldn't ever be let out of prison. The Judge Aquilina, said you used your position of trust in the most vile way to abuse children. I agree that now is a time of healing, but it may take them a lifetime of healing, while you spend your lifetime behind bars thinking about what you did and taking away their childhood. Now you think about this, folks. It's not just the 7. It's all the others. All of them. And 7 is bad enough. 1 is bad enough. But all of these young ladies are going to spend their lifetimes with this blemish on their psyche, on their being, on their emotional well-being, because of this monster, this devil, who did these things to all of these girls. If it were your daughter, how would you want this guy treated? Should he have been allowed to plead guilty and get a lower sentence, 25 years, maybe 40? Or should he have just been sentenced to life in prison without parole for what he did to dozens upon dozens of young ladies? So far admitted to 7, but there are certainly more than that in this situation. People like this don't stop anywhere. The girls testified that Dr. Nasser, former Dr. Nasser, molested them with his hands, sometimes when a parent was present in the room. Why were they there? Because of gymnastic injuries, so they were getting his help, and he would do this sometimes while the parent was there. Now, of course, you could say, why did the parent allow that to happen? And it may be because they thought that was a legitimate medical reason. One of the victims, Larissa Boyce, said this was a man we trusted. He's admitting what he did was wrong and evil. And they trusted him. He's charged, as I mentioned, in another county, Eaton County, where there is an elite gymnastics club. And by the way, he's waiting sentencing in federal court on child pornography charges. this sicko had child pornography in his home. It is absolutely grotesque, and how he got away with it for this long is amazing. This guy should never, ever be out of prison. And he's going to get out, maybe, since he's 54. And I would not want to see that, but that's the way it is at the moment, at least, that he will serve a period of years and then be released. Jimmy in Dorchester, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Afternoon, Mike. Okay, I was telling you before a couple of days, I think a day ago, where I go into the court system. Well, I got to tell you about this one predator. He's been arrested 54 times. He goes in front of judges, right? He's already went after 4 victims. You know what he gets with these judges? I told you, 30 days in Bridgewater. I don't know who is behind helping him out as far as a politician. 30 days in Bridgewater. I asked the police officer about this girl because in 2008, when he first started his, going after his victims, he should be a level 3. They have him as a level 2. Well, listen to this. That little girl is never going to be the same. What he did to her in 2008, she was 10 years old. Now she's 17. I asked the police officer. 4 months ago, she tried to commit suicide. These victims will never be the same. I'm telling you, Mike, it's sad.
And he's gonna walk out of there at some point in his life if he lives that long. I hope she gives him the 40 years and that he can never get early release, because at least that might be his lifetime. He'd be out at 94. Yeah, you're right, Jimmy. Thank you for calling. He's absolutely right. Once this happens to the girl that he's talking about, tried to commit suicide. And how many of these girls in this case are going to walk around with shame for the rest of their lives? Scott in New Hampshire, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Hello, Scott.
Hey, Mike. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. This monster, he needs to get put away. I mean, 3 strikes, you're out. They need to lock these up and never let them up, never let them out. There was a music teacher in my daughter's school that was actually filming little girls in the bathroom. He got caught and he got put away. But
for how long would be the question?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't know. I think he's still in jail right now at this time because he had so many counts against him. He probably had a dozen different counts of this. So, but this is very scarring to the kids and to the parents as well. So the ripple effect is just enormous. And that guy's right. I mean, these kids are never the same after. And there's a lot of parents out there that are just nervous now.
And he did this right in front of when the parents were in the room. In some cases. In other words, trying to make it appear to be a medical basis for what he did when it was not a medical basis at all. Now we find out the guy had child pornography in his home. You see,
self-gratification. Yep.
This is not like a guy who robs a bank or who steals a car where you can rehabilitate somebody. Maybe they're desperate for money, whatever the case may be. This is a sickness. This is not just a crime.
Now, isn't there medical proof that there's something wrong with a pedophile's brain? Like, there's a difference between me and you, Mike, and these sickos. I mean, I hate to say it, but they're sickos, right? But they also have a medical condition, I believe, as well. And I don't understand it, but I don't know if there's some kind of cure for this, because we ought to send them all over to Madagascar and let them die over there. I mean, it's just crazy, Mike.
Well, I appreciate the call. Maybe that's a good
You're
idea.
welcome.
Get them out of this country.
Happy Thanksgiving, too, buddy.
Happy Thanksgiving to you as well. Enjoy it. Truly enjoy it. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that this guy should never be let out. Lock him up and throw away the key is my answer. There's no way, no how to justify this. Let's go to Arthur in Chestnut Hill. Arthur, you're on with Mike Siegel here at the Voice of Boston, WRKO, for Jeff Kuhner. Hello.
Well, it's always a pleasure, Mike, and to your family and to all the wonderful listeners and good people out there. I wish you a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank
the
you.
others, I don't wish you a happy Thanksgiving.
Anyway,
The trouble we have is another big problem with America today. We have too many liberal judges who turn around and think everybody can be rehabilitated. And I hate to say this, but and I hope people take it the right way, that women judges act like mothers when they have these cute little boys come before them who are evil, but they look at them and say, "Oh, he looks like..." They have maternal instincts, and it affects their judgment when they pass out sentences, I believe.
Well, if that's the case, it shouldn't happen. I apparently, under state law in Michigan, by pleading guilty, he avoids the life sentence. Now, I don't know whether the judge has discretion or not, but he should not have been allowed to do that and then be able to get out, because this guy's never going to change. It's a permeated sickness within this guy. He's diseased. He's going to get out.
Lepers never change their spots. Once you're evil, you're always evil, and you just get more cunning and better at it. And you know what? We don't catch up to them, and we give them too many rights, and the victims have no rights. Victims don't get probable cause. They don't get their rights read to them, and it doesn't matter what kind of cruel and unusual crime that's committed against them. They get nothing. But the criminals, they get every possibility to do whatever they want, and no one's changed these laws. It's been proven to be ineffective.
That's true. I appreciate it, and the laws sometimes do, unfortunately, benefit the criminal instead of the victim by far, because these girls are going to have this problem emotionally for the rest of their lives. 617-266-6868. That's the number to Boston. Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner. Let's get your calls. How do you feel if it were your child abused by this former doctor? Mike Siegel in at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Stay with us. It is 12:25 at the Voice of Boston, WRKO, and we deal, unfortunately, after this segment, I think all of us should go take a shower. Maybe there'll be a run on water in the Boston metropolitan area, because we all need to take a shower after talking about Larry Nassar. Evil personified. Had 7 young girls that he admitted penetrating and harming sexually as a medical doctor who was entrusted with their care. And now he pleads guilty this morning, and he's going to wind up getting 25 to 40 years. Now, that may wind up being his life, but it ought to have been a life sentence, period. Or maybe 100 years, so that he would never get out alive. Barbara in Bridgewater, 617-266-6868 is the number to Boston. Barbara, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at the Voice of Boston, WRKO.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for taking my call. I'd like to make 3 points. And one is, I don't believe that pedophiles, because that's what he is, I don't believe that they're sick. I believe that they're evil. And the reason I believe that is because when you're sick, I guess that kind of implies that you don't have a choice about things. But evil, you go ahead and you do this, even though you have a chance to stop at any given time. So to me, I think they're evil. That was my first point. And my second point is, I don't think child molesters can be rehabilitated. I don't think they can be fixed. And I'd like to hear from professionals out there. If someone could call in, psychologists, psychiatrists, whoever has maybe dealt with these pedophiles, and because everything I've read says that they cannot be fixed. They can't be healed. They can't be rehabilitated. So now, what do you do? Because it seems like this is an epidemic.
Well, thank you for calling. The one thing I would say is that I do think they are sick. There was a guy in Washington State death row who had abused sexually and then killed children. And there were these goody two-shoes attorneys who tried to save his life when he got the death penalty. And he actually wrote a handwritten letter to the judge saying he didn't want these attorneys. He wanted to die because if he was kept alive, he'd escape and go out and do the same thing all over again. So to his credit, he knew the only way to stop him was ending his life. So it was a compulsion. And with many of these people, it's a compulsion. With some people, maybe it's evil, as you said, Barbara, but with other people, I think it's just strictly a compulsion over which they have no control, and that would be a sickness. Jimmy and Methuen, you're on WRKO, the voice of Boston. Hello.
Yeah, hi, Mike. Thank you for taking my call. Happy Thanksgiving. Yeah, I just want to make a comment on this NASA situation, and also to what's been going on in Hollywood and in Congress too, which is guilty of some of the same things. I think a couple of things. First of all, we've dropped our Judeo-Christian values, completely dropped them. And, I don't think 50 years ago I was 12 years old. I was pretty innocent. But I don't think this was as bad because, people went to church. People, they believed in God, whether in the Judeo-Christian value structure. Today they never do. And the other thing that I think is, because of pornography, American society is so polluted that our sexuality of many men and women is being, I say mostly men, but some women too, is being twisted. So they're not interested in people they should be. As an example, I'm not saying people need to be heterosexual, but they're not interested in other adults. They'd rather seek after children because the sexuality has been so twisted due to the explosion of pornography in the past, since the 1960s and
Well, what
70s.
about even now? I mean, today you can go online and find all the pornography you want. I mean, that's just where it is. And I appreciate the call, Jimmy, and I thank you. But, what about these girls? How many of them are going to be dysfunctional because of what this Nasser did to them when it comes to healthy relationships with men when they get older? Think about that one. 617-266-6868. We'll get to your calls. If you're on the line, stay right there. And if you want to call and share your thoughts about this, it's our children, folks. Our children at stake here by a medical doctor. At the Voice of Boston, WRKO, it's 1230. Here we are right back at it, 1235 at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner. If you get an opportunity, take a look at my piece that I did about Roy Moore and Al Franken at WRKO.com. I do a piece there every week. I hope you'll take a look at that. And also the book I did on talk radio and the power of this vehicle called Airing the Wave. It is a book about how campaigns in talk radio have been successful, campaigns that I was involved in over the years that worked out to change policy in the public sector because of talk radio. It's called Airing the Wave because we're now in the digital era. And it's a whole new ball game here in the field of broadcasting. So I appreciate you getting a copy of the book. I think you'll enjoy it. It's a great read. Airing the Wave, Mike Siegel, and it's available at Barnes & Noble and Amazon and elsewhere. Let's go right back to your calls on Nasser. We'll get to other things as well, but Nasser is the former doctor who abused sexually young girls when they were under his care at the USA gymnastics team, and he's now pled guilty to 7 instances of doing this to young girls, 7 different girls, but there are about 125 others who have filed complaints against this guy. Because he pleads guilty, he winds up getting somewhere between 25 and 40 years. I think January 12th is going to be his sentencing, and unfortunately, he should have gotten life in prison. You can't change people like this. Freddie in Brockton, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Mike, it's always a pleasure when you fill in for Jeffrey. Him and you guys go hand in hand.
Thank you.
So my topic is what these women will have to deal with in life. So I am a husband, and my wife, at the age of 11, was abused sexually.
Well, that's horrifying, and I'm sympathetic. But I want you, since you called about that, maybe you could talk about how it's affected her, because that's the point of this.
Correct, and that's where I want to go. She has, through the years, had to deal with a man. I thought, when I met my wife, for all intents, she had told me, she goes, I really hadn't been touched. And then when we got married, we were celibate until we got married. The day of our marriage, when I touched her, this woman was in a panic frenzy. And I said, goodness, something's wrong. Well, she thought she could submit all of those feelings and hide them. When she became a wife, not only did she have to deal with them, but as a husband, I don't have a relationship with a woman like most men. I have to be cautious. I have to be granted permission because I don't want her to be affected as an adult woman. So it has, unfortunately, she can't even conceive children because of what this unforgivable monster has done to her when she was a kid. So
let me ask you a couple of questions. This is powerful. Would you be able to describe for us what her relationship was to the person who did this? Because normally at the age of 11 it's going to be somebody she knew.
It was a relative. It was a cousin
Yep.
who was in charge of babysitting her. And
that's
how
it happens.
Mom and dad both were alcoholics, and they would leave, their children with a babysitter, and it was a babysitter that did this. So it was a cousin, and it's utterly, and then not only is it really difficult to deal with as a husband, because now I'm 50 years old, and I look at a sexual relationship with my wife as being one of the most important items in my marriage, as far as I want it to be completely under her terms so that we don't have a stressful relationship. But there are times she'll say, please, Freddie, stop. Don't hug me at night sometimes. There's a whole slew of emotions. And that's what people don't realize. And unfortunately, the last caller really, really hit the nail on the head. I believe that the society of pornography, I see these young girls, they're wearing tight leggings. They've got skin showing that. And I'm telling you, society is degrading real rapidly. Of course, we have what got us through our relationship is we became born-again Christians. And the only thing that helped was knowing that Jesus Christ forgives. Because this man is already out of jail. He only did 8 years for raping a child. He had
terrible.
He had a 30-year sentence and was out on parole in 8 years. And
that's horrific.
The scary part.
That's horrific. Let me ask you a couple of questions. Was it a one-time incident, or did you do this repeatedly to your wife?
It was repeated.
Oh my goodness. And so now, and I want this audience to understand this. Even to this day, as an adult woman, I presume into her 40s now. Is she in her 40s?
That is correct.
That she still has trepidation about a legitimate, healthy sexual relationship with her husband on occasion. Now, I assume there are times when she's able to be okay?
Yes, and my wife, God bless her, she tries her hardest to satisfy me. And there are times when she's trembling because she's trying to satisfy me as a man. And she's in my arms. She's trembling. And of course, at that point, you're like, at that point, it becomes no longer sexual. It's just, you become compassionate to it.
Do you know how many times this monster, as you put it, and he is, how many times he abused your wife when she was a child?
It went on for about 6 months until she finally, somebody had picked up because at 11 years old, by the time she was 12, she resorted back to bedwetting as a young lady. Triggered everything.
I appreciate your calling about this because it is so devastating. Let me share one with you and the audience. Someone who was very close to me from the time of being in college for years. And thank you for calling, Freddie. I appreciate your being candid there. Someone very close to me for years, as I said, told me the story of how she was taking a bath at, I think it was also the age of 11, it might have been 12. And her uncle came in and touched her inappropriately. And she told her mother, and the mother just didn't want to hear it. You know, that's what happens sometimes. Parents think kids are just fantasizing about this stuff. And you got to take them seriously because they're not. And amazingly, we're at my home one night, many years later when she was an adult, and she said to me, and I had a home studio, I was doing a radio show, and during a break she said, I'm going to go take a bath. I said, great. Later she told me that was the first bath she had taken, and she was at that point in her, probably 30s. It was the first bath she had taken since the incident with her uncle, because she was in a bath when he touched her. But she trusted me so much that she was able to take a bath in my home without any trepidation. But it was the first one. That's the kind of impact, as Freddie described and I just described, that happens to people, and it's a lifelong problem that you deal with. And that's what this guy Nasser did to these girls. Jim in Saugus, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Hey, Mike. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good. Nice to talk to you. Thank you for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Mike, you know, with this thing going in Congress, I have to say that I think President Trump did not realize when he kept saying the words in his campaign about drain the swamp there. I had an understanding, but I didn't realize how bad it was in that swamp. You know, and what's going on with these female staffers, et cetera, with these congressmen, you know, to find out that I, as a taxpayer, have been paying out kinds of money all these years for paying off harassment suits, et cetera. I think there has to be some kind of a committee drawn up that should probably be taken around to look at these people, identify them, find out what those individual people. And if they're still in office, they should pay that kind of money back that was paid out on their behalf. And those are retired, whether you attack their pension or go after it.
Well, you know, first of all, these people get benefits, and we could go into, that's a whole other area, they don't deserve. Number one, how about this one? There has been $17 million paid out in taxpayer money from a private fund that Congress keeps for the sexual harassment settlements of members of Congress who abused their position and had these settlements made. Now we're paying the taxes for their bad behavior. How about that one?
Oh, that's what I agree with. In fact, that's what I've just been made aware of by listening to what's been going on. And I can't believe that somehow Congress, who makes their own laws and rules that we can't vote on or et cetera, and we don't even know if they vote behind our back, make those kind of rules to take care of themselves. That's not fair to the American taxpayer or any American citizen.
If you do bad behavior, you pay the time and you pay the fine.
Absolutely. And that's what I can't understand. And so we should be able to find out who these people are. I don't care if we have to go back 10 or 15 years.
They better go public with this. They haven't done it yet. It's all private, but they better go public. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Jim, for your call. Walter in Wilmington, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello, Walter.
Hello, Mike. Thank you for taking my call.
Yep.
I would like to start off with it's a pleasure hearing you fill in for anybody. The only reason I can think that you don't have your own show on RKO is because you keep refusing the airtime.
No, that's not the case, but go ahead.
Well, beyond that, I have friends in law enforcement that have told me on numerous occasions when it's a big story in the news that these sex offenders, primarily child sex offenders, it's the way they're wired. No amount of therapy or incarceration changes them. It's just the way they're wired. They supposedly can't help themselves. I
think it's for many of these. I know the Barbara called earlier and said that they're just evil, but I think when it comes to going after children and the kinds of things that they do in the child pornography in their homes on their computers, I think that's a compulsion and a sickness, and that's why I said this one guy, Wesley Allen Dodd was his name, in Washington State. He wrote a very grammatically poor letter, but it was a letter to the judge saying he wanted to be executed. He didn't want these lawyers trying to save his life, because if he got out, he would do the same thing all over again to these kids. And he knew he would do that. That tells me that he had enough sense to want to be gone, because he would do the same thing to other children. That's a compulsion.
Well, and I would imagine with children, they're an easy target.
Oh, they're a very easy target. And that's why a lot of these people get into positions of authority. Look, what about this doctor, Nasser, who just pled guilty? He was in a position of authority as a medical doctor over these girls. You have Boy Scout leaders. You have priests, as we know. People get into positions of authority over children when they have this sickness and compulsion, and it's distressful. I appreciate the call, Walter, and I thank you, and it's he's right about that. It's just something that is not easily overcome. Even if somebody has the sense in their mind that they're doing bad and evil things, sometimes it's just a compulsion they can't control. And that's what this guy Wesley Allen Dodd said. You could Google him, I'm sure, and read online about him. He finally was executed because he wanted to be, because he knew he would do that to other kids if he were kept alive. He said that to the court. Mike Siegel here for Jeff Kuhner at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. The number, 617-266-6868. Let's get your calls, 1250. Back after this. Back we are. It's good to be with all of you. Coming up to 12:54 on the day before Turkey Day. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, everybody. We'll be here till 3. And we are talking about this degraded disgrace, Larry Nasser, a former physician, who was the physician overseeing the USA gymnastics team, young girls hoping someday to get to the Olympics, doing gymnastics, and he committed sexual abuse of at least 7. He admitted to doing that with 7, and there are now about 125 others who have filed lawsuits against him, civil lawsuits. And he faces charges, criminal charges, in another county in Michigan. He's also been charged with having child pornography in his home. How did he get as far as he did at the age of 54 is my question. Andrea in Weymouth. Hi there, Andrea. You're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO.
Hi, Mike. I'm always delighted when you're on. I'm calling because I want to know, where were all the liberal women like Dianne Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi, the women on MSNBC, CNN, the mainstream media, when they saw on video Joe Biden, who was a heartbeat away from the president, abusing young girls on video? And I spent a lot of time this past week looking at them, and you see there are a couple of girls, they're young girls under 10, where he puts his hand underneath their arm toward their chest, and you literally see his fingers creeping toward a little girl's nipple. You can go and watch these things. They said nothing. The same women who are saying, all these women accuse Donald Trump's a pig, whatever, nothing. They said nothing because they're gosh darn hypocrites, and I'm sick of it.
Well, you're right. Look, I can tell you that people who are working with the National Organization for Women, at the time Bill Clinton was president, who committed a violent, vulgar, criminal rape against Juanita Broaddrick. And it's interesting that he's never really brought any kind of lawsuit of defamation against anybody who has said that. All of a sudden she's being believed now, Ms. Broaddrick. But the fact of the matter is that the National Organization for Women, according to people who were there at the time, actually the president said of that organization said, well, yeah, Bill Clinton is a whatever, thug, abuser, but he's our abuser. He's our thug, so we have to live with him because he does the right thing politically for women.
It's never good, Mike.
That's what their answer was, though. That he's look, this woman at the Washington Post, I think her name is Amy Crawford. She wrote a piece saying Al Franken should stay in office because he's a liberal, a Democrat. We need him. I mean, in other words, they're willing to take vulgar criminal behavior. And it was, by the way, even the Franken touching Ms. Tweeden, the KABC morning anchor, news anchor, that arguably is a criminal offense. It's an unwanted touching in a sexual part of her body where it was when she was asleep. Now that's a battery. It's assault. It's not assault because she didn't know about it. The assault would be if she was conscious of the harm coming to her and she was asleep. But it was certainly a battery, the unwanted touching, and arguably criminal because of where he touched her with intent and the fact that she was unaware and he took advantage. So you could say that was certainly a civil battery, maybe a criminal battery. And it was certainly intent to touch her in a sexual area of her body. So even in spite of that, this woman at the Washington Post, and I'm sure others, say, well, he's a Democrat, so we have to look past it. Well, no, you don't look past it. You don't put politics in the way of grotesque behavior, abusing women, for God's sake. What you do is to say anybody who does that is wrong. And that's it. And I think, by the way, in the Roy Moore case, the president was basically taking the correct position. We have seen now that there has not been a turning over of the yearbook with the allegation of Roy Moore's signing this girl's yearbook. The girl and her lawyer have not turned it over to get authentication of the signature and the ink being old, if it were. And Roy Moore has asked for that. So it raises questions. There are questions about this. I'm not saying he didn't do those things, and if he did, he should drop out. But as it stands right now, he's saying he never did it. The young women are very credible. They say he did do it. But in a case like that, where you can't resolve it in a court of law before the break, before the election, I should say, you really have to wind up saying, let the people of Alabama decide. They are the jury in this case. They'll decide. And that's what we need to hang our hat on there. And if they decide he should be kicked out and not be senator, so be it. Fine with me. But let them be the decision makers. We come back on the other side of the news, and we'll talk about cars, electric cars to be specific. Mike Siegel with you at the Voice of Boston, WRKO for Jeff Kuhner. Stay with us.
The Voice of Boston is you. 680 WRKO Boston, 93.7 WEEI HD2 Lawrence, Boston. It's 1 o'clock.